Germany is one of the most powerful countries in the world, with the 4th largest economy on Earth and the 2nd largest population in Europe. The geography of this general area has helped give the modern country the power it has today. However, the same geography that made Germany into what it is today also kept it fractured amongst hundreds of tiny kingdoms until as European recently as 150 years ago. So what exactly are Germany's geographic strengths and weaknesses, and how did they work both to its advantage and its detriment? And how do they continue to do so in the present? This video is brought to you by Ground News. With a population of more than 80 million, Germany is the most populous country entirely in Europe, with a similar population to that of Turkey or Iran, or about a quarter that of the United States, or like 6% of China, or about 1,064 Andorras. Germany also shares borders with one of the highest amount of countries in the world, with 9 different neighbors: Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Poland, France, Austria, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Czechia. Although since these countries and Germany now form part of the Schengen area, this means nowadays Germany is surrounded on all sides by friendly countries, something that certainly was not the case throughout its history. Germany contains parts of some of the most important rivers in Europe, including the Rhine, Danube, and Elbe, whose tributaries and watersheds spread throughout a massive chunk of Central and Southeastern Europe. The first two are also connected via the Rhine-Main-Danube Canal, allowing inland passage from the Black to the North Seas. However, this is just one of the newest among a whole series of canals traversing the country. The Mittelland Canal, for instance, connects France with Poland through internal waterways. So if you're a French, Belgian, Dutch, or even British shipping company and you want to trade with Eastern Europe, you could go all the way north through Schleswig-Holstein or even all the way around Denmark. Or you could just send a small barge through Germany's other canals. This interconnectedness between so many of these rivers throughout the entire country serves as the lifeblood of Germany and made port cities like Hamburg economic powerhouses. With railroads too, this is a similar case. Even before Germany unified for the first time, its various kingdoms invested a lot of money into the railroads. Now, railroads were first invented in England, with the idea of speeding up transit from town to town, but Germany was the first to build a long-distance railway. The line opened in 1847 and connected the Rhine River all the way at the western border to the Weser in the east. Most German railways were also either public or heavily regulated, and thus there were strict rules about equal access to railroads. This meant that even small towns and remote areas got train stations, and people from those areas had access to industrial jobs or education in big cities. Compare that to the US, which didn't build its interstate highway system until the 1950s, and yeah, we don't even talk about the US rail system, at least not these days. As they were in the 19th and early 20th centuries though, well, that could actually be a pretty interesting video for another time. Looking at a topographic map, one of the key divisions within the country becomes clear. Not the Cold War division between East and West, believe me, we will get into that later on, but the division between the flat North and the mountainous South. This division in fact explains why the dialects spoken in the North are called Plattdeutsch, for low or flat German, while those in the mountainous South are called Hochdeutsch, or High German, not to be confused with the standard German that you might learn on Duolingo. To this day, this difference in topography affects virtually all of Central Europe, from Austria being separate from Germany and having a whole empire to its own, to which form of Aldi your country might have. But before we learn more about Germany's geography and how it affected its development over the centuries, let's first take a minute to thank the sponsor of today's video. Hey, did you hear what happened on the news lately? Ah, you mean the attempted murder on the other farm? Is that really what you think of it? It was literally only 2 crows. Oh, so you want more crows to eat all the crops, do you? What? No, that is a complete human argument. Why I oughta— Come here, you— Yeah, come on, get some! Jesus, guys, is there anything you can agree on these days? Oh god, no. Maybe? You know, it's not a good sign if you're getting vastly different headlines for the exact same news stories. That's why I'm super happy to be sponsored by Ground News. See, I'm a big fan of not just learning about the world, but truly understanding it and how everything within it works. And Ground News is the best news aggregator out there that can help you expand your horizons. And Ground News has a few tricks up its sleeve that I think you might enjoy. For example, and keeping with the theme of Germany's geography, one thing I haven't really touched upon in this video is Germany's dependence on Russian oil and natural gas. It is thus pretty big news that a 50-meter section of the ruptured Nord Stream 1 pipeline seems to be missing. You can see how it's being covered in left or right-wing newspapers, how these newspapers phrase their headlines, whether the sources are international or local, and how factual these sources generally are. You can view ground news in the international dashboard like I am to get a world view of top stories or stories being underreported, or in the US, the UK, or Canada. You can also use the map feature, ooh I love maps, to see what stories are being covered in different countries around the world. To stay fully informed on issues around the world, go to ground.news/KhAnubis. Germany's economic core is largely situated in the west, near the Rhine River, mostly in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. While many of Germany's economic centers, however, including the likes of Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Karlsruhe, and the Rhine-Ruhr megaregion, all lie in the west of the country, within the so-called Blue Banana megaregion, the capital and largest city, Berlin, lies all the way out in the middle of the east. Germany is a much less centralized country than a country like, say, France, which in relative comparison is practically dominated by Paris. When Julius Caesar led the Roman army against the Gauls, they encountered many of their numerous Germanic neighbors, such as the Suebi, the Angles, and the Saxons, with many of these tribes eventually becoming the likes of the English, the Goths, and the Vandals. Caesar, or Kaiser, no that is not a coincidence, described these tribes as very decentralized, with patriarchs who would settle disputes between families. Eventually, a few of these families became a kind of ruling class, but there was still no single monarch to unite all the tribes. Being so disconnected and located right near the center of Europe also meant that outsiders often found themselves interacting with different groups, such as the Alemanni or the Saxons or those people too dumb to speak like us. Hence all the different names the modern country has in different languages. After this guy named Charlie, or who the history nerds know as Charlemagne, conquered the area and was given the frankly amazing Christmas present of being crowned Emperor of the Romans, excuse me, we're still alive? A new entity called the Holy Roman Empire came into power over the region, or as history tubers like to call it, the Godless Germanic Union. In fact, that's part of the reason countries like Luxembourg and Liechtenstein still exist, as the Holy Roman Empire that ruled this area for 1,000 years wasn't a kingdom, but more of a weird sort of confederacy between all these smaller kingdoms. German and French rulers constantly fought over the Holy Roman Emperor title, but as the centuries went by and memories of charismatic emperors like Charlemagne faded, the individual kingdoms got harder and harder to control. Finally, Napoleon took over France, steamrolled through Europe, declared himself the Holy Roman Emperor, and got defeated, which was the final nail in the coffin for the empire. After that, a few of the bigger kingdoms, especially Prussia, led an effort to unify the Germanic peoples into one country. See, Prussia, with its capital being Berlin, and all its neighbors, were right in the middle of the northern European plain, a region infamous in the eyes of anyone who knows what Poland is. However, in the south, another kingdom had also been expanding its hegemony: Austria. By the mid-19th century, Austria and Prussia were the clear dominant powers over Central Europe. However, with Prussia dominating more traditional German lands, and Austria's realm spread out over the much more varied groups to the southeast, mostly down the Danube River. But long story short, especially since I've already talked about the politics and history of all this in greater detail in past videos, Germany finally became a unified country in 1871. Blah blah blah, that's enough backstory, let's get back to geography. Of course, after World War II, the Cold War made a now resplit Germany a potential passageway for someone Western European countries did not want in the area: the Soviet Union. The Fulda Gap, this lowland area on the border between NATO-aligned West Germany and Soviet-aligned East Germany, became one of the easiest targets for a Russian invasion. Thus, Fulda became a key location for NATO and Soviet forces to watch over each other. Germany and its capital were divided between the NATO and Soviet spheres of influence, and to this day, a stark division exists between the East and the West. While not the poorest region in Europe, Eastern Germany still lags behind their brethren in the West. For the West, however, West Berlin found itself entirely surrounded by the German Democratic Republic, effectively cut off by not-so-friendly territory. This, by the way, for those of you not very familiar with Berlin, is why the Berlin Wall didn't split Berlin, but encircled West Berlin. 3 different highways in the east became Transitstrecken, which West German citizens could use to drive between the two parts of the Federal Republic through East German territory. Though with the East restricting whether its citizens could leave, naturally these routes also became a way for Easterners to try to get smuggled into the West. Of course, nowadays it's the 21st century, with a now reunited Germany surrounded by 9 fellow Schengen area countries, 8 of which being in the European Union. With the aftermath of World War II, being split between NATO and the Warsaw Pact in the latter half of the 20th century, and the rise of the European Union, of which Germany is effectively one of its leaders, Germany's priorities today might seem almost nonsensical to those who led the country only a century earlier.